With us now is Senator James Lankford, Republican from the great state of Oklahoma. Senator, thank you for joining us. I first of all want to hear how you reacted when Mr. Sekulow just gently started to raise that Russian false flag of Ukrainian influence in our election in the well of the Senate today.
So it was interesting. He made a pretty clear statement of saying everyone's trying to make this argument on the House Democrat side of saying you either believe Russia did it or you believe Ukraine did it. But there is a sense that was there all the influence in Russia? Yes, there was a tremendous amount of influence in Russia. Were there some individuals in Ukraine that might have been involved? Yes. And he even raised a letter from some members to say, hey, let's answer some questions to the Mueller report to make sure there's nothing there. There's nothing inappropriate for the president of the United States to be able to say to a foreign leader. I've got my intelligence people saying one thing to me. I've got other folks saying another thing to me. Can you help us just unpack this? That's not an inherently political thing. In fact, it was always interesting to me when the House managers raised this issue of saying the president's trying to help his campaign. This phone call on the 25th of July was the day after the Mueller report had put the whole thing to bed. The Mueller report had said just the day before and closed the case and said the president as candidate Trump was not involved with collusion in Russia, no conspiracy there. So it seemed odd to say it would help my campaign to be able to raise an issue. It seemed like to me he was just saying, hey, there are some people saying one thing, some people saying another. Obviously, his intel folks were all telling him it wasn't Ukraine, it was Russia doing it. He raised the question, said, could you help? Could you do us a favor to try to help clear this up? And Zelensky said yes.
Reasonable people can disagree. Last night in Mr. Schiff's wrap-up, he quoted a CBS News piece that had the now famous heads on a pike quote as part of it. Number one, was it genuine umbrage on your side? And number two, how did that quote read so false?
So I would say it was genuine umbrage, and I know everyone's trying to say this is some false flags, that Republicans wear their emotions on their sleeves so much they're going to do that. That's ridiculous. And anyone who knows, any of the members of the Senate know we've had plenty of attacks. It was the implication from Adam Schiff that all senators live in fear of the president, and they know the president's going to take them down and put their head on a pike, and you're all like a party to him, and you're all secretly in this conspiracy. That's what he was really saying with it. It was genuine frustration. If you were in the room, it was the first audible statement of the crowd back to him as he's speaking to say that's not true, because that had not been statement, and most of us had been sitting in the hearing all day and had not heard anyone bring it up. Someone mentioned it to me early in the morning, and I thought, what kind of crazy statement is that? I've never heard of that. And then for Adam Schiff to be able to bring it up and to say, well, I hope this is not true, but I understand, was just absurd to be able to make that statement.
Of course, the problem is Senator King of Maine just reminded us the president basically did just that with Jeff Flake of Arizona.
But the problem is that many of us know the president and get a chance to be able to interact. And there are all these folks that don't talk to the president that say, I know what he's secretly like. Except that those of us that actually know the president and have been on phone calls and have been face-to-face with him know that he gets frustrated about something. We'll tweet it out, talk about it, but you can also sit down with him and talk it face-to-face even when you disagree.
Jim, it's Claire McCaskill.
Hey, Claire.
You know, a tape has surfaced yesterday that is clearly the president talking in a meeting with two Ukrainian American donors to his campaign, where there is not only discussion about firing Ambassador Yovanovitch, but the following statement made by the president: how long will they last in a fight with Russia? Where one of these Ukrainian Americans who gives money to his campaign from Florida says, not 30 seconds without us. Don't you want to hear that tape?
You're saying that's already released and it's already a part of it. Again, that's not really relevant 100% to what we're talking about here.
Wait a minute.
I think we deal with all the facts that are out here.
How can it not be relevant if the president is trying to find out what kind of squeeze it puts on Ukraine if we're not giving them money? How can that not be relevant to what you're hearing?
Okay, so the first thing is actually dealing with the money that's flowing this time. As the White House counsel dictated out today, here's how the money flowed, here's the timing, here's when the Ukrainians about it. You're beginning with the presumption the Ukrainians knew about some kind of squeeze, were experiencing a squeeze, and the president was using that money in that way. To be able to say that over a dinner time conversation with somebody is very different than actually implementing that as policy. And I know you can say that's what the president's going to do in a policy, or he was trying to implement. The problem is the facts don't actually prove that out. The implication may from it, but the facts are not.
But Jim, is it relevant evidence? It should be part of the record? Should it be allowed into the record? Shouldn't more evidence that is around this subject be allowed? Is that a problem?
So the first thing that's going to happen once we go through all these questions, as you know, will be 16 hours of Q&A back and forth, and anyone can bring anything up they want to be able to bring up. And then there'll be a question about additional evidence, additional things. The House managers have not been shy to say this was released yesterday. Let's talk about it. This was released yesterday. They'll be able to bring that up. It's not like there'll be a vote to prohibit anyone bringing anything up that's related to that. They're welcome to be able to do that. There's an implication that all these things are being blocked out there in the public view. They're not being blocked out. What's in the public view? The vote will be on, do we need additional witnesses that the House chose not to call or didn't go through the court process to be able to call, or do we need additional evidence? There's also this interesting Article 2 argument I heard Angus King mention before, which I do believe he's very sincere in that, and I'm very sincere in that. A president should not be able to just block out all documents, all testimony. He should not be able to do that. But the White House counsel today came and raised multiple issues with that. One is saying the House didn't go through the normal process of actually empowering those committees to call a subpoena. Trying to be able to call a witness from a committee is perfectly appropriate. Trying to be able to do that as an impeachment process is different. That has never been done before. So their conversation is this is going to empower the president even more. The president's conversation is this would be an untold power back to the legislative branch. This has always been resolved in the courts. And Adam Schiff's closing argument yesterday is the courts are not relevant in this. The courts should not be used in this. They take too long. He spent all kinds of time saying the courts take too long. We should block the president from the courts and demand that he does everything and not allow that citizen to use the courts. That would be different and a dramatic shift in our constitutional process.
Senator, this is Chris Matthews. I was wondering what you thought when you heard from the initial record of the conversation of July 25th, when you heard the President of the United States asking a foreign head of state, elected foreign head of state, to look into the situation involving Joe Biden, a fellow American. Do you think there was any connection between that query by the president and request for an announcement of investigation and the fact that Joe Biden was leading in the polls then?
You know, there's no way I can read the president's mind. I know Adam Schiff and the House managers said they can read the president's mind. They know all the intent of not only President Zelensky and President Trump. But I would say, as I read that, and I do encourage folks to actually read the full transcript as the White House counsel was doing today, and they laid out what happens. The President of the United States said, do us a favor, and then started talking about the CrowdStrike issue there, which I don't believe either on it. But the president's saying he's got people on both sides of that, asked him to be able to resolve it. Then President Zelensky raised the issue of Rudy Giuliani. That wasn't President Trump that raised that issue. And there's been a lot of folks saying the president raised this issue about this. He didn't. President Zelensky raised it, and then President Trump responded to it from there. So everybody should be able to see plainly what happened. This was in response to President Zelensky's statement.
Well, what about the Biden conversation about the former vice president and his son working for Burisma? Why do you think the President of the United States was focusing on a fellow American politician?
I think because Rudy Giuliani, who was working for him on the campaign side, was focused in on that, and Rudy Giuliani was keeping him up informed on that. He has a campaign arm that is out there. That's Rudy Giuliani and other campaign folks that they can do opposition research no matter where it is. Just like the DNC hired a British citizen, Steele, to be able to do investigation into Russia to try to get dirt on President Trump during the 2016 campaign. That was a foreign influence to be able to do that. Rudy Giuliani has the ability to be able to do that. President Trump shouldn't have raised that initially, but when it was raised, he could respond to that. But he shouldn't have raised that initially because that's a campaign separate issue.
So it's wrong for a president to have a conversation with a foreign head of state in which he asks for political help?
No, I think when he's answering the question and saying, yep, me, Rudy, that's separate. That's a separate issue. Me, Rudy, I'm glad you're meeting with him. That's a whole different issue. If Rudy Giuliani is trying to be able to get engaged with that, again, that's a campaign engagement, just like the crowd, just like the all the dossier document was a DNC-produced document coming from Russia from a British citizen.
Right. Thank you. Thank you,
Senator James Lankford, state of Oklahoma. Senator, thank you for taking our questions and for hanging out with us.
Glad to be able to visit with you.
Thank you.